Presento l'ultima che ha un titolo interessante: Evidenze e creatività in terapia. Per lunghi viaggi occorrono buone intenzioni e buoni mezzi. È un titolo interessante. Poi, Camillo, oggi Carlos ha deciso di presentare per ultimo, e
Sì,
siccome questa ultima tavola rotonda, questo ultimo dialogo, siamo insieme io, Fabio, Camillo e George, e c'è anche Carlos. Io proporrei di fare una cosa unica, quindi se sei d'accordo facciamo cominciare George, poi
perfetto.
Carlos e poi te. Va bene così? Può andare?
Come volete, come volete, come ti
Eh,
pare. Va bene tutto.
Anche perché abbiamo le traduttrici, così le facciamo tradurre in contemporanea
Va bene.
prima
D'accordo.
l'intervento di George. Quindi George, eccolo lì, con i suoi bei capelli e le sue palme dietro, palm trees under your neck, dietro il tuo collo. Ok, vai George.
Ok,
Ciao Giorgio.
thank you. Buonasera, grazie. Voglio ringraziare il dottore Mariotti e vostre... si scusando per parlare inglese, ringraziare chi interpreta. With humility, my goal is to use the lens of epistemology to consider creativity and efficacy and ask you to engage personally in this process.
Okay.
Okay? For 40 years, I have been on faculty at the University of California, San Francisco. I directed a program begun by Carlos Slutsky to educate family physicians in a systemic perspective and gain skills in relational therapy to use in their medical practice. These are the directors historically, and you see Carlos and now Corey Johnson, who now directs and is improving the program. And I describe our curriculum in the upcoming Franco Angeli book. Today, I want to ask you to engage with me as I interweave some questions for your own personal reflection and then interweave them with concepts. The questions will be included in the recording, so for now, just think about them, look at them, make a drawing, listen to them, listen to your heartbeat, to your breath. So let me pose a few questions for you to think about. These are questions about your own family. When someone is sick in my family, who takes care of them? Do we talk about illness in our family? Do we tell people outside when someone's sick? How does my family view the person who is sick? Sympathetically, indifferently, blaming? How does my family deal with tragic events and with death? Not some concepts. Questions such as these tap into beliefs and values that constitute our epistemologies. And examining how our epistemologies interact, I propose can enhance our creativity and our effectiveness. I also believe that this examination transcends particular models of treatment, and so therefore, regardless of which particular school of therapy you practice, I believe they're relevant. Let me just be clear on my definitions. Defining epistemology as a theory of how we know what we know, how we see the world and make sense of it, and the network of rules that govern our systemic patterns of interaction. Creativity is when the therapeutic system writes new rules that foster new patterns of interaction. And effectiveness is a therapeutic system's assessment that collectively working together on self-identified goals is more valuable than not working together. Now, I believe there's always a number of intersecting epistemologies in our world and in our work happening at the same time. In society, there's dominant epistemology of the society, the culture, the nation. In the United States, it's reductionism. Similarly, each scientific field has its own dominant epistemology. As we know in systemic therapy, there's a more relational epistemology, but in interpsychic or individually focused therapies like CBT, it's a much more reductionistic. And therapeutic models are also their specific epistemologies, and then every one of us has our own version of an epistemology shaped by our own experiences and our own beliefs. These epistemologies are always communicating with one another, whether we're aware of it or not. And everybody has epistemologies, not just the therapist. We often talk about it only in terms of the therapy epistemology, but really all members of the family come to us and have epistemologies individually, and there's often a family epistemology. Bateson described two levels of epistemology: the epistemology of action and the epistemology in action. The epistemology of action is what we think we know, and the epistemology in action is what we or others observe. Argyros has shown research how these epistemologies operate, and that we enact the epistemologies in relation to each other. And we can often observe them through reflection, looking at observed sequences through videotapes, hearing from other people, but that these two levels of epistemology are always operative. We find that the theories of and the theories in action operate outside our awareness. Michael Polanyi described it as tacit knowledge. These epistemologies, that they operate in the periphery, and they're brought about through reflection and articulation, which help clarify the rules and values and the assumptions that underlie them. And we may find that there may be contradictions within our own epistemology. We may not be so clear on the answers to the questions. And when we compare what we think we know with what we actually do, these theories may be dystonic or systonic. It's often when we diverge from each other that we actually find something of value. This is where the creativity may emerge, where we might find the difference that makes a difference. Now, we currently talk about the intent of a message delivered, where someone says, I didn't intend to hurt you, but the actual experience was what you said was offensive. And so the theory of action is actually in conflict with what actually happens in the theory of action. Now, another set of questions for you to think about, if you'd like. How does my family explain why people get sick? What strengths do I see in myself and in my family? Is spirituality a part of the illness experience for me and my family? When do we consult an outside health professional, whether a physician or a therapist, for help? So in the therapeutic encounter, the theories of action of each family member and the therapist continually operate and interact. So we also then, as therapists, need to be aware of our own personal epistemology, the treatment model epistemology, whether we are psychodynamic, whether we are structural, strategic, narrative, the dominant epistemology of the healthcare system that we're in. Are we in a reductionistic model of healthcare? And the dominant epistemology of the society that we operate in. There also may be divergence or convergence between individual therapists and their family members, and between family members themselves. The interaction can catalyze a process in which new information can emerge when we compare these theories of action and interaction. And participants can calibrate, recalibrate, and consider if the information poses new sets of rules or interactional patterns. And so the process of collective creativity can occur through action and reflection. It also allows therapists and family to continually ask if their exploration of epistemologies is bringing them closer to the goals of treatment, and therefore becomes a mechanism or a metric for us to evaluate whether or not we're effective. Another set of questions. What is my view of life and death? Why is there suffering? What are the roles of the therapist? What is the roles of the patient and family? What do I believe is the process of change and healing? What do family members believe is the process of change and healing? And how do I evaluate the effectiveness of treatment? Our own residency program's epistemology is a meta pattern. It's the believing in Basin's concept of the sacred, that we're all part of and not apart from each other. That conscious purposeness is a dangerous truncation. That we can't accept that we will act with good intentions, and also that life is uncontrollable, mysterious, beautiful, and tragic, and that we're required to rigorously maintain humility in our response. Also, our program's epistemology believes in anti-oppression, that because we are so interdependent on each other, we cannot see someone else as other. We cannot discriminate or be racist or oppressive. We are always connected with one another, and that the outside cultural and systemic structures that we in the family interact with every day are in the therapy room. It's not just with the interactions that are potentially oppressive when we're in therapy. And finally, our epistemology values mutual learning, that we and families share epistemologies and expertise, that effectiveness is not framed as success or failure, that collective liberation of ourselves and families is the goal, that we're engaged in a co-evolution that enhances all of us, and that we recognize that those who come for help, as well as ourselves, are very human and also wounded healers. Let me give a quick clinical example from our practice. A 60-year-old patient with metastatic stage 4 lung cancer came to see her family physician resident. That resident had been the patient's doctor for 3 years. The physician felt stuck and asked the patient to attend the systemic training clinic for live supervision. The patient's conversation focused on symptoms, on her constipation, on her tiredness, but the physician wanted to discuss her imminent death, which she felt that the patient was avoiding. The physician asked what the tiredness was related to. The patient said she had been tired, she had a heavy heart, that she was unprepared for the responsibility, that her children were unprepared for the responsibility of taking care of their own lives after her death. She and the patient and the physician discussed her worry. The patient was reluctant, but listened to the physician, who said, "I think your heavy heart has to do with your fear of challenging your children," and asked if she would bring him to the next visit. The patient said that she thought that she would, and she would bring her children, but only one daughter came, but she was also reluctant to talk outside the family. The mother said that she felt her daughter and other children were not helping with the household tasks or paying bills as she was getting sicker. The daughter said she didn't think that the mother wanted help since she never asked. She always thought that the mother was very clear with what she wanted throughout her life. But the mother said, "I've always been asking what I've wanted in my life. How could you not understood this?" They realized that they had both misunderstood and the cues from each other. The daughter and the other children were expecting the mother to tell her what they needed. The mother said, "I always felt like I was walking on eggshells, and I'd only tell them after many days of impatience and frustration of holding things in." When they realized that they had had this difference, they agreed to change and the daughter went home, and the mother all talked with the other children. And the mother and the other children began to change. They picked up the tasks, and the mother died in their arms 2 weeks later with all of her children. It was in this process of everybody in the room, the mother, the daughter, the supervisor, the resident, all having their own theories about what was happening, their own epistemologies, and then enacting them together brought about a new sense of the divergence of opinions and perspectives and what could possibly be done in rewriting the rules. And that only became evident through the enacted epistemologies. And this was always done with the consciousness of the context of the outside world. So in conclusion, I'm proposing that we think about a collective epistemologic process, not just the epistemology of ourselves as therapists, but it involves interrogating the multiple interconnected epistemologies from the societal to the individual that operate in every therapeutic encounter. And that this meta process is applying to any model of treatment that any of you are learning and applying. So I'm asking you to consider some of the questions that I raised and many, many more questions that are very much revealing of the way that you believe and think and value, to ask those of your family members, to ask them of the families that you treat, of the people that you work with your faculty, and realize that all of these epistemologies are dancing together. Consider the convergence of the theories of action and the theories in action. And to appreciate the sacred meta pattern that connects, that it can enhance the collective creativity of the family and the therapist. It can provide specific dimensions to consider the treatment's effectiveness. Gregory Basin said that an epistemology of the sacred, if rigorously attended, is a metaphor of love. It's my proposal that I believe that all of your work and ours together of collective liberation is love in action. Grazie mille a tutti. Ciao.
Okay, thanks, George, very much for
Grazie,
your presentation. That there are many concepts very interesting about a concept of epistemology, no? And anti-oppressive epistemology. I love this concept. And the idea of a collective epistemology and the very important the important thing of about context, ovviamente, and that Gregory Bateson suggestions.